What is up, everybody? I'm No Lex Given here with your afternoon snap, and there's been a little bit of a lull on my channel for Marvel Snap content. I'm actually away this week, so I haven't had too much time to record content. Obviously, there's going to be no more content this week because I'm out of town, but I was able to record one more video, this one, and I figured I would just do a little more of a showcase for Power Patriot Silver Surfer, since those videos did seem to do well. That was mostly because people were looking for Patriot decks, but I also did a Silver Conquest after I did a Proving Grounds Conquest, so I figured I would show that off, skim through some of these games real quick and see how those go. So we're going to look at two Silver Conquest battles here, a full Silver Conquest, and this one kicks off with Brood into the Raft on turn 4, which is pretty nice. That will allow me to get a free 6-cost character, but I am totally giving up in the kiln, and that's going to mean that we're really going to have to battle for the raft too. And we actually get the Living Tribunal, which makes things totally complicated because now we could actually potentially still battle for the kiln. So that'll be a nice little surprise for my opponent next turn. And then we also have Patriot and Silver Surfer both to continue to add power to the raft. So we're not totally out of it in that location yet either. I'm going to play Maximus this turn because I do think I'm going to want to play both Silver Surfer and Patriot and the Living Tribunal next turn. And I think I just like to keep Patriot a secret. So I go for Maximus here. And unfortunately, my opponent has Professor X. So they are now going to stop me from playing for the rest of this one, and I feel like they're probably going to be able to get me in the raft. I lose to Chavez, so I'm going to retreat and just take my 2-cube loss here for the first game. It's unfortunate because I felt like this one was actually going pretty well. We had a lot of different cool things that we could have done, and we probably just win that one if we just played Living Tribunal. I forget exactly what my opponent had there. Maybe not. But either way, now we are on to game 2 here. First location is going to be Strange Academy, and we've got Medusa as a turn 2 play, so that's good. Sokovia is going to take out my Maximus and my opponent's Thor, but we've got Patriot, we've got Silver Surfer, we've got Groot, so we've got a lot of power still left in our hand despite losing that Maximus. Lemuria is going to be our 3rd turn location, and Brood seems like it's probably a reasonable option here, unless I think I could catch my opponent with the Groot this turn specifically. I'm just going to go for the Brood though and fill up Lemuria, and then turn 4 probably just want to go for Groot. I'll throw that into Sokovia. I feel like that's reasonably where I could expect my opponent to play this turn, and we get it right. So I'm going to snap on that correct Groot read there. My opponent has Polaris to move Medusa out, but it still keeps its bonus power, even if it's moved around, so not too big of a deal. And then my opponent hits me with a few more rocks, which can be a little bit annoying, though we do have a pretty nice play here. We get to play a Mr. Sinister and a Patriot on 5 energy, and then I'll get to finish off the game with Silver Surfer plus whatever 3-cost card I draw off the top of my deck. We're going to miss that Cosmo. That's going to be in Sokovia, and we'll have priority too, so it's not like they could have Cosmo'd us on the final turn regardless. So things are looking pretty good. We're also winning both other locations going into the final turn. Mr. Fantastic off the top will also continue to add power into Sokovia, and yeah, overall I think this is a pretty powerful game. So my opponent is going to get out of it, and now we are tied up 8 cubes a pop here, moving on to game 3. Game 3 is going to kick off. We've got Brood, Groot, and Wolfsbane first location. Weird World. So this is going to be a weird game, and it's actually a little bit of a weird match overall, and we have some other weird things going on in the future games. But that second location is going to be X Mansion, so just a lot of randomness going on in this one. I know a lot of players are like, they hate Weird World. I think it's cool. I think that it adds a fun element to the game. I like District X too, but I can understand hating District X, but Weird World, it's just you like switch decks, like, so you're still playing with like top tier cards. There is a lot of randomness involved in it, of course, but I enjoy it. And then X Mansion, that's going to activate this turn. Asteroid M, a very weird location for these Silver Surfer lists. A lot of times people will just play into Asteroid M, so I figured that was a reasonable expectation. So I just throw Groot into the Asteroid, hoping that my opponent's just going to play there this turn. But they've got an Invisible Woman for the X Mansion. I always try to avoid X Mansion just in case you find yourself against any Guardians of the Galaxy, but we're going to get the Collector off of X Mansion, which gets pumped up each turn by Weird World. So Collector is going to be a 5 power card to their Cyclops that is a 4 power card, but potentially gets pumped up by Silver Surfer and Patriot out of my deck. So Cyclops is not a bad one, and it's always a little bit sad to me that like a Silver Surfer Patriot list doesn't want Cyclops, but Cyclops has its time to shine now with high Evo decks, so I guess it's fine. I'm going to play Brood. That'll get thrown over into Asteroid M, and then I get to throw out a Darkhawk and like a Wolfsbane this turn. Oh wait, no, this is turn 5, sorry. So this turn I'm going to play like Luke Cage plus Darkhawk probably, and that is a decent amount of value here. What's interesting is Rock Slide is actually kind of terrible in this matchup, well, in a Weird World game, because, and this is what I think is like cool about Weird World, is it like does reward you for understanding more various interesting interactions. Here specifically, my opponent is getting punished for rock sliding me because then they are more likely to draw rocks out of my deck. So that is kind of funny and a little bit awkward. I'm going to Wolfsbane plus Cosmo for the final turn. I figured my opponent has some cards under Invisible Woman. Maybe we'll catch Silver Surfer there, though they Silver Surfered into Weird World, but that's going to mean that it's not pumping up those Invisible Woman cards. And well, actually, they get the win in X Mansion. They need to pump more in the other locations, but regardless, we get the win in Asteroid M and Weird World, and with that, we get the victory. And I think this was like a pretty good showcase for Weird World. It wasn't like a super crazy game by any means, but like I just made better use of the random pieces that were given to me than my opponent was able to do, and that game was definitely winnable from my opponent's perspective too, I believe. But this one, we get Mindscape. That's why I said it's kind of a weird match overall. Mindscape in this next game. So we're going to be swapping hands on the final turn of the game, which means Invisible Woman is really clutch, because now I could still potentially make use of Silver Surfer, despite the fact that we're going to lose our hand on the final turn, which makes things a little bit awkward. But on turn 3, I'm just going to run out Brood into Stark Tower. Collapsed Mine on turn 3 is really awkward for this deck, because it means that we have to skip like an important turn, and it's really tough to be skipping turns with this deck. So don't love that we see the Collapsed Mine show up. I'm going to Polaris on turn 4 here to move over my opponent's Luke Cage, and from there we are going to see them rock slide me again this game, and now Mindscape is going to give it up to my opponent, but we do get the Silver Surfer here, like I said, which is nice. So now we can delay that Silver Surfer and still make use of it next turn. I haven't found a good time to skip. My opponent's going to Professor to keep those rocks in there regardless, so glad I didn't skip this turn for sure. And then on the final turn of the game, we take my opponent's hand, and then we draw Patriot for turn. So I thought this was a really, really great showing. This game in particular for Power Patriot Silver Surfer that really shows off the power of Patriot, if there were any potential doubters, because that Patriot is going to give us 8 power in the Collapsed Mine, allowing us to beat Professor plus Mr. Fantastic in that location, and Silver Surfer is going to easily allow us to win the other 2 locations as well. So sweet game. I only take it for 2 cubes, didn't want to snap, and give it all away, but now we are up 8-2 after being down those 2 initial cubes. So feeling pretty good here as we move on to what is potentially the final game to make us 1-0 in this silver conquest. We've got Patriot, Mr. Sinister, Maximus, and it's an Altar of Death game, and you might have been able to see that animation above me. I tried to tap the cube to snap when I saw Altar of Death because that's just such a sick location, but it does also work well with our hand. Mr. Sinister is good with Altar of Death, and it's just fun. It's just fun, so I kind of just wanted to snap. But we'll run out Mr. Sinister into the altar on this turn. That'll give me 5 energy next turn, so that's enough to play a 3-drop and an Invisible Woman. I can either just play the Invisible Woman, or I could potentially play it into the altar to then have 6 energy on the 4th turn. So there's a lot of different options that I could potentially go for here, and I think I actually wind up making a mistake. I use Invisible Woman plus Maximus, and I didn't realize that doing this in cloning vats would actually mean that I only get back the Invisible Woman. Since Maximus is never played, it's never flipped over, and it's never flipped over, it's never considered played, so I just don't get an additional copy of that from the cloning vats. Unfortunate. Would have worked out better for me if I had just run that into Xandar, as Cosmo would have stopped it, but oh well. What can you do? From here, I've got 4 energy, so I can play Wolf's Bane into the cloning vats, and I feel like I'm going to be pretty good in Altar of Death with having seen nothing from my opponent's deck that's able to contribute there. So I'm feeling good with the Mr. Sinister. I play the Rock into the altar to give myself a little bit more energy again next turn, and this turn my opponent hits me with the Widow's Bite, which I can at least throw into the altar to potentially give me some more power in, or more energy for the final turn of the game. So that's kind of fun. And then 7 energy, I'm just going to run out my hand into Xandar. It means that I'm not really going to have too much of a use for extra energy next turn, but let's get rid of that Widow's Bite, throw down another Invisible Woman, and my opponent has no clue what's going on. They are going to Professor us in Xandar, but yeah, I guess that's just going to mean now it is a battle for the cloning vats, and I'm feeling pretty good there. All I can do is play a Rock this turn. That's kind of awkward, but we do have the Maximus, so that's a decent amount of power. My opponent hits me with the Darkhawk for 14, and then a Luke Cage. That's not really going to do anything. My opponent definitely going to grab the win in Xandar, but cloning vats is going to be close. Maximus, Wolfsbane does get to count that unflipped Rock, and then the Rock will actually allow me to win in cloning vats because of Patriot. I thought this was a really sweet game as well, where we just barely find the win, my opponent giving us some rocks, and then we are able to turn those rocks into a nice little victory there with Patriot. So really, really cool game. Let's take a look at one more full silver conquest battle here against a different deck, but again, a really fun battle and game overall. Kicking things off with a Sinister London game, which is always a ton of fun. And this is even like a more supercharged Sinister London game, as we'll see in a second, because our 3rd location is going to be the Bifrost. So now what we can do is actually start playing into Sinister London right now, and then next turn, everything's going to move out of Sinister London, and we'll get to make use of it again. So that'll be really cool. Mr. Fantastic will actually move into the center location, so that's fun as well. But my opponent has the turn 3 Sandman off of double Psylocke, so that is going to slow me down from doing everything I want to do, but it will still allow me to do a lot of fun stuff this turn and this game as well, because with Sinister London, you actually wind up running out of space pretty quickly to play everything that you want to play. So it's actually not the hugest deal. We'll still be able to play a ton of fun stuff. Do I go for the Groot here in Sinister London? I don't think that I actually do, because Groot is cool, but I'm only going to be able to play 1 card next turn and 1 card the turn after, so I might as well just go for Maximus here. It's 1 more point. It's actually 2 more points. It winds up being a bunch more points even as my opponent plays nothing on turn 4. So that would have been 8 power. Instead, it is 14 power. And we drew my opponent a bunch of cards, but that's unlikely to really matter too much, as we just have an insane power lead over on my opponent. So I'm going to snap here as I drop the Brood into Sinister London, and I kind of want that to go into Xandar. So I'll get a few extra Broods, but honestly, either way this Brood lands, even if it just lands in the Bifrost, I think that that's still pretty great for me. My opponent plays a Sunspot this turn and soaks up 4 energy for 8 total power, but that's not going to be able to compete with Silver Surfer here, no matter what my opponent has. Even if they played like, I don't know, Cosmo or something on me here, there's nothing they can do. Silver Surfer is just going to add, I mean, the first one adds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 18 power. The second one adds 20 power. Or first one adds 20 power, second one adds 22 power. So 42 power on the final turn. That would have been pretty dang good, and my opponent is correct to get out of that one here. So round 2, we have Polaris, Patriot, and Medusa. A pretty reasonable start to the game, and the Kiln is going to kick things off. You might see, or you might notice rather, that Polaris is not in the deck list on the side of the screen. I brought this up in my previous video on Power Patriot Silver Surfer. I wasn't initially playing Swordmaster, and I've actually changed the deck a little bit since this video. I've cut Debris, and I've added, and I've also cut Mr. Fantastic to add Killmonger and Nova. I just thought Killmonger was pretty good in the meta. You'd see in this game it can destroy the Ebony Maw, though I will say the Polaris is able to do some nice stuff for us in this game. My opponent snapping to Oscorp Tower here I think is a pretty obvious Electro, but I think that there's still some fun stuff that we can get away with, especially with Polaris against an Ebony Maw. And Kiln, locking down one location. So I'm going to play Maximus to win the Kiln here, and then I'm going to play Polaris to move my opponent's Ebony Maw into Oscorp Tower, and then the only location my opponent will be able to play to is Quantum Realm. Kiln's going to lock down, Ebony Maw is going to lock down the tower, excuse me, and then all they can play to is Quantum Realm for the final turns of the game, and that's going to set anything's base power to 2 there. So that's pretty terrible for my opponent. Plus it looks like they were trying to do some Black Panther shenanigans, so they're done. They're kind of out of it here. Very, very awkward setup here for my opponent. On turn 5, I don't actually remember what I go with here. Feel like you could get away with Brood and then potentially just Patriot Silver Surfer. And you could do that on a lot of various different combinations, but I think what I will go for here is just Brood into the Oscorp Tower just to like definitely win that location since my opponent won't be able to play there next turn. And awkwardly, we catch my opponent trying to Gamora us in the one location that they can play to. So very, very awkward. That is going to be a 2-power Gamora, and I am Electrode. I forgot about that. So that was kind of impacting some of my decisions here. I'm now only going to be able to play Silver Surfer on this final turn, but that will allow me to win in the Oscorp Tower and in the Kiln. So I should be able to take my opponent for 8 cubes here and grab that gold ticket. They have Arnim Zola. That's not quite gonna do it. So that Gamora will not be enough power to defeat the Silver Surfer here, and we grab the win. So there we go, an undefeated second match for this Silver Conquest. Pretty sweet stuff. Like I said, that will give me a gold ticket. That was actually last season these games were played, but still think that this is a fun deck. Like I said, I added Killmonger into the deck just because I think it's good for the meta. Like, if you're just looking pound for pound, most power for the cards that you can play, Killmonger and Shang-Chi are classically pretty good rates. If you kill like even like a 3-power Nebula, Killmonger is still a 3/6, which is like Swordmaster levels. But most of the time, there's a lot of Kitty Prides running around, and if you can take out like a 6-power Kitty Pride, then Killmonger's a 3/9. So yeah, I felt like I had to put it in the deck. It's pretty good. But other than that, still having some fun and some success with this list. But that's going to be it for me today and for me this week. I should return back next week with some more fun Marvel Snap content. But for today, for this week, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.